Hello and welcome to my video on Mini Jam 150 Magic. So this jam is a 72-hour game jam last weekend, and it was 72 hours. Although something happened and I didn't quite use the full 72 hours, but we'll get to that. Yeah, this was quite a fun jam, and it works slightly differently to the previous jam that I participated in, which was the GMTK Game Jam 2023, where that jam had just one theme that it was given, but it was quite a unique theme. This one had a more generalized theme, but then gave you a limitation as well. So the theme was magic, and the limitation was light is the way. Overall, I thought it was a cool little theme, and I got to work. And on the first day, I started off by first making a completely different game to what I submitted, which was a sort of a game, sort of like you're a desk assistant and you're trying to convince dark wizards to use light magic instead, something along those lines. And honestly, it was a rubbish idea. And I think I realized after developing it for an hour or so that it was just bad. It was just a load of rubbish. So I scrapped it, and I then went on to another idea, which was just a platformer, a puzzle platformer, where the character would follow light, or would walk towards light and move towards light. Initially, I was going to have it so you'd click and it would spawn in a bit of light and the player would walk towards that light. Problem solved. Or the character would automatically move towards that light. But then after trying to code it in and playing the game, I had actually made it so that you could hold the button down, or the player would automatically follow the light whether it was in the air or wasn't in the air. So, but there was also a rigid body on the player. So basically, all that means is the character would, although it would do what I wanted it to, it would move towards the light. If it was in the air, the character would just constantly jump. And I saw this, and I'm like, this is actually a cool thing. Having the character be able to sort of bounce us around if you have it in a certain way, or having the character jump if you hold it in the air, is actually something I could use to make this game better. So I kept it, and it's a feature in the game now, where if you hold the light above the player's head, or if you hold it a certain sort of angle above the character, they'll jump. And then the higher you move it up, the higher they'll jump. And it honestly was probably the best decision I could make, because it made the movement quite fun to use. Or at least I thought so anyway. And yeah, so the first day I implemented that movement, and I implemented the light spawning in. And then I moved on to making sort of the first sort of tutorial level, and I sort of initially tried making enemies in the game, and I was going to have it so they would walk towards the light, but it didn't exactly work how I wanted it to. It didn't quite... The enemy didn't quite work, and I thought, you know what, screw it. Instead of making this a full-on platformer, why don't I make it a puzzle platformer instead? So instead of enemies, I made it so there was a block that if you touched it, it would reset the level. I also made a few blocks where if the player held down the mouse button, like they were moving the character, they would the blocks would change state, so the blocks would disappear or appear depending on what sort of type of block it was. And this worked quite well. I think it worked rather nicely. They all worked, and it was sort of fun to use. And I came up with a bunch of level ideas. I think by the end of the first day I had 6 or 7, which I did quite well. I did a lot in the first 24 hours of the game. Roughly 24 hours of the game. And yeah, I think that was it for the first day. I had 7-ish levels. I had no art or anything yet, but I had 7-ish levels and a few ideas for the next few. And I wanted 10 in total, so the 7 was a good start. And then also, like I said, the movement worked, and I genuinely had a direction for the game. And then we moved on to day 2. And for some reason, I woke up on day 2 thinking, damn, this is the last day. And I would like to point out, it was not the last day. In fact, it was a 72-hour game jam, and I had, in fact, 48 hours left of this jam starting that morning. I had 48 hours from that morning to finish my game. So, being the smart person I am, I did not, in fact, use the last 24 hours of the jam. I only used 48 hours of the jam total. And so this day, I panicked a little bit because I'm like, damn, I've got to figure out what these last 3 levels are going to be. I'm going to have to get like a main menu and things going. I'm going to have to finish off adding sort of hints and tutorialing the player through the first few levels to get a hang of the movement properly so they can enjoy playing the game. I've also got to get music done, and I've got to get art done, and I just panicked a little bit because I had a few ideas. I had ideas for 2 of the levels, but the last level I had no idea what I was going to do. So I started off by, first calming down a bit, and then I made the levels I was sure I knew what I wanted them to look like. So I finished level 8, level 9, and I did a sort of jigging of the levels because I thought a few of them were a lot easier than others. And then I just left level 10 because I didn't know what I was going to do for it. And although it sounds stupid for a puzzle game, just, make a really hard level. But I felt like the level I already had was already quite difficult. And wouldn't, if I make something, I wasn't sure how I was able to make something harder without introducing another mechanic, which in the first 7 levels of the game probably isn't a good idea to have more than, 3 or 4 mechanics, as it will overwhelm the player. So I was stumped for a little while and moved on to art instead. I made the design for the character, which was a wizard, as I had to follow the theme of magic. I made a few grass and ground tiles. I made this sort of rocky, coloured rock sort of tiles for the disappearing and reappearing tiles. And I made some weird spiky cornered block for the kill block with like a cross in the middle. And I also made another character which was like the opposite to the wizard. It was sort of like a green female character, which I was going to put at the end of the game as the thing you're sort of trying to work towards. It was I think in the end I decided it was his wife or something, but it was an end goal at least. Some kind of work towards challenge rather than just completing the levels for the sake of it. And I was quite happy with it all. I then tried thinking of level 10, and then I did slowly realize that instead of making a really difficult level at the end, I can just make a slightly easier one and help sort of smooth out the transitioning of difficulties through the other levels. So that's what I did. This level 10 was technically like level 6 or something in the end of the game when I finally remade all the levels. But I did have 10 levels in total, and I was happy with them all. I feel like they all sort of helped the player figure out the next gimmick or mechanic very nicely. So then I got to the end of the day, and all I had to do was make some music, add it into the game, and make sure the characters' animations and things worked, and make a main menu. The main menu took me like 2 seconds because it wasn't anything special. It was literally basically just a coloured screen with 2 buttons on it, which sort of lit up orange when you hovered over them. Just default Unity button stuff. And that's all I could really do, because obviously I thought I had 48 hours, and this was my last few hours of development time. And yeah, I made the main menu, and then I made the music, I implemented everything, and I had a pretty solid working game for a game jam of 48 hours. And I submitted it, and I submitted a fully working build of the game 24 hours early. And it took me until the morning of the next day to realize I had another 24 hours to work on this game. But I did, on the last day, I didn't do anything, because I sat there and I have a game I'm happy with. It works well. It's no problems that I found. And yeah, I was happy with it. And I thought it worked really well. So I left it how it was. There's no point changing something that I'm happy with. And rushing on this last day to add finishing touches and possibly ruin things which I know are already working. If I'm happy with it, I'm going to leave it. So I had a sort of like a rest day on the final 24 hours of the jam. And then, yeah, I think I got a comment after the jam finished, as it finished on the Monday and not the Sunday I thought it did. I got a comment the next day on Tuesday, or it was Monday night, something like that, where from somebody who also participated in the jam, and they said that my game was overall good. And I think they said there was a problem with the music or something, of it resetting, or I'm not sure if that was just my horrible music making skills, and it just sounded like it did, or I just didn't fix it like I thought I did, or submit the wrong copy. Something like that. But if the only problem they had with the game was the music, I can sleep at night. I don't have any results yet, because the results haven't come out. They'll probably come out in the next few days. So I will put a link to my Twitter in the description of this video, so you can find out the results when I post about them. So yeah, follow me on Twitter.